Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So, 2 days ago my finals for my first semester at the university have ended. So I'm finally free from my stress and any academic obligations. So I thought I'd drop back onto BookTube and update you guys on what I've been reading and what I have read and what I will be reading, as well as a tag that I was tagged in a video from Joshua Crable, a tag that was originally made by Hannah's Books. So I'll do that later, but we'll start off first by what I've read since I last met you. So the most recent book that I finished was Grant by Ron Chernow. He was also the author for Alexander Hamilton, which inspired the play Alexander Hamilton, which has gone on to be quite famous, I think. But I really love this figure, Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. Originally, his name is Hiram Ulysses Grant, but somehow his name got mixed up to Ulysses S. Grant, and um, he's a very stoic man, um, and you can see how aloof and how pragmatic he is when it comes to battle tactics, and when he eventually becomes president, very trusting in his subordinates, and therefore led to some of his downfalls and his reputation being tarnished. But I can see why a lot of historians today see him as underrated, massively underrated, and put him next to Abraham Lincoln as a very influential president. And on a personal note, I really like him, how he deals with people, and his mindset about not taking, being very humble about his accomplishments. And my favorite chapter in his book was when he was finished with his second term as president, and he narrowly missed out on his third term, and he went on to travel overseas, went to Europe, and he went to China and Southeast Asia, and he was the first president or ex-president to like do like diplomatic rounds, or if I recall it correctly. So that was very interesting of him, and he was very against racism, which is always a plus point. Um, and yeah, it was written in a way which really highlighted his characteristics, not only his strengths but also his very glaring faults. And I appreciated the nuance in his book, and obviously his wife, his children, his subordinates, how he was as a general, as a president, and as a father, as a husband, and his drunken habits and his rumors of drunkenness even in battle. Um, but he's a very flawed man, but overall a great man. Um, and yeah, and this book by Ron Chernow makes me want to get to his other books on Alexander Hamilton. If I'm not wrong, he also did one on George Washington and one of the Vanderbilts. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 5 stars on Storygraph. Um, and I would want to get it as a copy of my own, since I borrowed this from the library. But I really love this book, and I think the next US presidential biography I would probably get would be William McKinley. It's either him or Theodore Roosevelt, but I think I'm leaning to Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. But yeah, so this is the most recent book that I finished. And bear in mind, I was studying for my finals the past month or so, so I didn't really have much time to read. But the pull of this book really like dragged me back to it and made me finish it eventually, because it's about 800 pages, or close to 900 pages, close to 1000 pages actually. So yeah, it even amongst my studies, it was something that put me back to it, and yeah, it was very engaging. So the book before it, or the book that I was reading concurrently with it, was A Great Deliverance by Elizabeth George, and it was the first book in a series, in the Inspector Linley and Sergeant Havers series. I thought it was good, without being too great. I thought the characters were the highlight of the whole, the first book at least. Thomas Linley, who is a intelligent inspector. He comes from affluence, and I'm pretty sure he has a title, but I forgot what his title was. and he has some sort of a love triangle with um, a woman and one of his best friends that he caused a very big accident on. And so that creates a bit of a dynamic in the relationship and his character. Uh, and then on the other side of the coin is Sergeant Barbara Havers, who has sort of a chip on her shoulder, and she's dealing with a lot of, I guess you can say, trauma from her little brother passing away from a sickness, and her parents not being there for her or her brother during his time of sickness. So she deals with a lot of baggage, and as a result, I think she carries a lot of resentment for Thomas Lindy, who comes from privilege and a background of comfort. So throughout the book, you can see the dynamic changing from her kind of despising him to respecting him to kind of despising him again. Um, and she sorts of despises him because of his womanizing as well. Um, and she blames him for all his faults and stuff like that, which is, valid. But I thought the first book obviously doesn't really flesh out their relationship that much. So I'm interested to see where their relationship develops to, because it can go many ways. It can either go to two people forced to work together kind of relationship, or two of them like warming up to each other. Well, Linley is really warmed up to Sergeant Havers, but it doesn't work the other way around. But I think by the end of it, she already kind of sees Inspector Linley for who he really is, and I think that's the direction that Elizabeth George will be heading in. Obviously, I think the whole series has been finished already, and it was a mystery series on television as well, on PBS. So I'm pretty sure the whole series is finished, but I'm excited to go into the second book soon. In terms of the mystery itself, I felt that there were not too many red herrings, but the red herrings, they really make sense, or they weren't really convincing enough to really make me scratch my head. And throughout the whole book, I was just wondering where she was going with this, where the author was going with this. And by the end of the book, I thought it was a satisfying payoff. But in the middle of the book, with the duo inspecting or investigating possible leads, it wasn't really that enticing, and that didn't really make me suspect of anybody. And I know that it's supposed to be a bad thing, but I found that the characters made up for it, and by the end, the plot really wrapped itself nicely together, and set it up for the next few books, or the next 15 or 20 books in the series. So yeah, I gave that one a 4.25 stars on Storygraph, and I really enjoyed that as well. Before that, I read Out of Range by C.J. Box. It's the fifth book in the Joe Pickett series. I think this was the weakest one I've read so far from the C.J. Box Joe Pickett novel so far. And it was because I felt that the mystery itself wasn't really fleshed out, and the pacing was kind of off, and it really rushed through a lot of sections very quickly, and the antagonist of the mysteries was felt quite underdeveloped. And Joe Pickett himself, obviously, he sort of acted out of character, in my opinion. Usually he's very loyal to his wife, but in this novel, he was kind of falling into temptation a bit, as well as Mary Beth, his wife. They display some uncharacteristic actions, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it. And hopefully, like, they don't go in that direction, because I like Joe Pickett as a character, because he's very loyal and very stick by the books kind of a guy, and I hate to see his character develop into something more corrupt in a sense. But overall, I still loved C.J. Boxer's writing. I mean, he's still a master at what he does, and I liked it, but I didn't really love it. But from what I know, this is one of the weaker kind of books. So yeah, I didn't really get into the plot for the past two books, but I believe that you can find out for yourself if you're interested. But overall, I felt that this book was also not great, but enjoyable at least, and I give it a 3.75 stars out of 5 for this. And then before that was the book that I was reading, that I I focused on it for quite a while. It's called Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives by Siddharth Kara. So he's a journalist who went to Congo to um, record down the atrocities that are happening in the Congo and how they, mainly Chinese companies and the Congo government exploit children for their labor, and um, basically how the politics of it rule the Congolese people, and how their lives are very unfair, and yeah, how their lives have been exploited for centuries now. And it goes back, it touches a bit on the history of the Congo and how um, colonial powers in the past have exploited them, and then how that exploitation has shifted into Chinese mega corporations, and how they've been continued to be exploited and made use of, and their lives being in shambles, and not having enough to eat to send their children to school. And it really opened my eyes to how um, the resources that are needed for our phones and computers come from like the suffering from these people. It made me like shift my thinking into like technology a bit, since the explosion of electronic vehicles has made um, the demand for um, batteries and cobalt especially rise exponentially. So now, even before the explosion of electric vehicles, it was really so bad. What will happen after the explosion in the demand, and how will the lives of Congolese people continue to deteriorate? So that gave me a lot of food for thought, and made me empathize with the lives of the Congolese much, and yeah, made me want rethink my own lifestyle and with technology and stuff. But I thought that it dragged on for a bit too long, and that's what made me drop it down to 4 stars. But overall, I still love the information that it translated, and the journalist was very brave as well, and he countered a lot of resistance to his investigations to the Congolese people, so much so that he had to change the names of all the people that he investigated, so as to not get them in trouble or any danger after he left. So yeah, that was the last book that I had read the month of November, and I'll move on to what I'm reading now. So I'm currently reading or not but Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, and this won the Booker Prize in 2023. And this book is about an Irish family who is living in a time of turbulence in the Irish government, where the Irish government is kind of turning into Big Brother from 1984, and a lot of ways it reminds me of 1984, the dystopian government kind of a feel to it. The main character is Eilish Stack, who is the wife to a man called Larry Stack, who is a trade unionist, and he goes missing after he organizes an event against the government, and so he's captured. And so I'm only about like 25% to this book, so I don't know much of what happens first, what happens yet, but so far her life is starting to get destroyed, and her family is kind of in shambles. So she's trying to put them together and find out what happened to her husband. And the way this book is written is that it has no quotation marks, so every single page is like one whole chunk of text without no breaks. There is breaks, but there's no breaking a part of the paragraphs to indicate who is speaking. But it's pretty obvious, and I found that it didn't really break up my immersion, but it rather benefited the book, I would say, because there wasn't any unnecessary deviations from the story itself. So the characters all speak to each other, and it's kind of easy to follow along. And so far, I like this book so far, and I want to see where it takes the dystopian kind of feel to it. And it really good reviews online, so I'm excited to where this ends. So that is what I'm currently reading. And the other book I'm reading on my Kobo, let me take it out now, is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. So I'm on the first book, the Census Apprentice by Robin Hobb. It's the first book in the the Farseer trilogy, and so far I'm loving it so much. I think that if it continues being this way, it might be my favorite book I've read this year or maybe ever. So it's about a boy named Fitz. He's a bastard to the king in waiting, and he kind of gets picked up by an assassin, and he's taught how to be an assassin, and he's sent on like various missions, and um, grows up as a bastard, and it's kind of fascinating to see how he deals with that, and how he deals being a bastard, and how he evolves from um, his childhood to where he is eventually. I'm hoping that's how the story will play out. But so far, I'm really enjoying this, and it's looking like a 5-star read for me. But I really love it so far. Okay, next, what I'm planning to get to is the third book in Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet. This is the third book, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay. So I finished the second book, The Story of a New Name, maybe about a month and a half ago. So this is the third book that I brought from the library, and so far I'm really enjoying this series. It's about two friends from Italy, and how their paths like kind of diverge and converge, and they go through marriages together, school, and how different aspects of their lives affect each other. And it's just a very um, unique take on female friendships, and I think it's not done in many books that I've read. Although I may be wrong, it may be quite common, but I think this is my first dipping into this kind of relationship between two female friends, and I love it so far. And I will start on it after I'm finished with the Prophet song. But yep, that is Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay. And the next thing is a really renowned book on BookTube, Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Now, I didn't really like the first book I read by him, The Road, by Cormac McCarthy. I didn't really like it. I thought it was too bleak. I mean, it's supposed to be bleak, but it was very dry and melodramatic in my opinion. However, I've seen a lot of praise and talk around Blood Meridian, especially on the villain, Judge Holden. So I want to see whether Cormac McCarthy can be so renowned just for his bleakness and his writing style. I mean, he has got to have something to him. So I want to discover that in this book, and I think this is arguably like his most renowned book. At least his most popular, I think. So I'll give it a read and see what I feel about it. And based on how I feel about it, I may or may not go to like another one of his more famous books like No Country for Old Men or Passengers. And if I don't enjoy it, then I think that'll be it for me for Cormac McCarthy, even though he's quite a popular author, at least among BookTube. But yeah, this is what I have in store next month or so. Okay, so next I'm gonna do a tag that was tagged in by Joshua Crable. So once again, I was tagged by Joshua Crable, and thank you for the tag, Joshua. And it was created by Hannah's Books, so it's called the Reading Shifts tag. So the first question is, how has your reading developed over your lifetime? Do the kinds of books that bring you the most pleasure now differ from the books you loved most earlier in your life? If you've seen big changes in your reading since you have matured, what might explain your changing interests? So I would say my reading has developed very much so in the past 2.5 years or so. When I was younger, I read since I was very young, ever since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. But obviously, I've been reading Geronimo Stilton and this author called Robert Muchamore and his Shrub series. Basically, a bunch of kids, orphans who are trained as spies and they go on missions. So mainly, I read Geronimo Stilton and the Shrub series, and I also read a book series by Charlie Hickson. It's called The Dead. It's where a bunch of kids survive in a zombie apocalypse, and all the adults are turned into zombies. And unironically, that's one of my favorite series up to this day. But that's what I stuck to mainly, to young adult fiction and more books which are catered towards younger readers. But however, in the last 2.5 years, I started to read more often and a wider range of books. So started reading more literary fiction, more fiction in general, more classics. But ever since I got into BookTube and started watching people like Steve Donahue and the readers whom it may concern and a couple of others, I started to read more history and non-fiction as well. And so in the past year or so, I've read at least is a straight down 50-50 split from non-fiction and fiction. Whereas about 3 years ago, I stuck to like mainly fiction and miscellaneous fiction, which I didn't really research on. I just picked up from the library. So now, because of all the recommendations and the main interest in BookTube on which books which are considered good and notorious, I mainly stick to those now to see what all the fuss is about. And so yeah, my reading taste has changed quite a bit. So obviously uh, the aspects of the books that I read before was more about like um, fun scenarios and children's books, like engaging, fun, plot heavy kind of books. However, now I tend to focus more on more nuanced books, which I'm okay with, like reading fun books as well, as seen from like the books I've read the past month. However, I tend to get drawn to more nuanced books. So that's how my tastes have changed. And why this might be so is because I think before I didn't really have the maturity to understand these kind of nuances, and so it kind of bored me, or I didn't understand it. So I think now that I've become a bit more mature, I don't think I've been mature yet, but now that I've been a bit more mature, I start to understand these nuances and start to appreciate it and enjoy them more. For number 2, do you find yourself choosing different kinds of books at different periods of the year? For example, do the seasons affect what you read for pleasure? Similarly, might you read very different kinds of books while on vacations? Also, I'm not a mood reader. If I were to set out a plan for what books I want to read, I will read those books only. And it may vary from what kind of book it is, but mainly I wouldn't change my my books just because I'm happy or sad. But if it's like I'm shifting from a non-fiction heavy information kind of book to the next book, I would tend to pick more light-hearted, more easygoing kind of book rather than a heavy, chunky book. So that's where my preferences lie. It's not so much whether I'm feeling happy or angry, or I feel like I need a cozy book that I shift my taste upon. So yeah, and while on vacation, I don't really change how I read as well. More so, I change to the type of book I'm reading, how thick it is, how portable it is more important. As a more important factor in whether I choose to bring that book. Let's say if I'm bringing a Grant by Ron Chernow, compared to a Perfect Song, it doesn't matter the content or like the type of mood that it brings out, but rather the portability of it that would bring on vacation. So number 3 is, do specific experience in your life ever shape what you choose to read? For example, did you read obsessively about child rearing your kids were little, about gardening as spring about to rain, etc.? No, none at all. I tend to just pick books which I'm interested in the moment, and those interests may come up from nothing, and they don't tend to spring up from any specific changes in my life. Although I haven't had any major changes in my life yet, so who knows, maybe that will change in a few years time, or 20 or 30 years time. So number 4 is, have there been any times in your life when circumstances have limited or changed your reading in some way? Perhaps caretaking responsibilities, or a big move that made it hard to find as much time to read as you like, or personal illness that made it harder to concentrate, or maybe just long-term travel that might have limited your book choices. How do you deal with those circumstances? Now, as I said before, I just finished up my finals, so I was studying pretty heavily at that time. However, it didn't really change what I read, what kind of books that I read. It's more so changed the amount of time I spent on each book. So mainly I was focusing on Grant by Ron Chernow while I was studying for my finals. However, like it didn't make me want to switch to another book if that's what the question entails. But obviously I had way less time to pick up and read it. Yeah, and it also after a long day of studying, it didn't really entice me to like read more stuff. So I tend to just watch YouTube and do more lazy kind of activities, so you can say. But I can envision myself um, being more um, conscientious in my time in the future when I'm busier with work or what have you. So I think that may change in a few years' time, but I will still definitely put some time apart for aside for reading, and I don't think that's ever gonna change. Number 5 is BookTube is full of discussions of reading slumps when dedicated readers seem to lose interest for a while in books. Sometimes they can't find a book that appeals to them. Have you ever experienced a slump? If so, how did you handle it? If not, do you have any advice to give people who are experiencing slumps? I would say I've had many mini slumps. I've never had a huge slump before. Although there was one period of time where I didn't pick up a book at all. I was kind of a music nerd, so how I am with books right now, it was with music. So I listen to at least one album a day, or one album every 2 days. But now I've shifted to reading, and in that period I didn't read much at all. And now I'm just focused all my attention on books, and I don't think that's ever gonna change. And now I've next to no interest to music anymore, so it's kind of interesting how my taste in the art form has changed so dramatically. But I don't see myself going to any other art form or any other media other than books. So I'm sticking to this for the rest of my life. I feel. But for many reading slumps, um, I tend to um, not want to start on a new book so quickly. So once I finish, especially a thicker, more content-heavy book, I tend to procrastinate on starting the next book. But I still have that excitement in me to start the next book, but I kind of procrastinate, and I dwell on the previous book a bit before I go on to the next. Um, However, I just have that pull to starting a new book inevitably. So I don't know what advice I can give for that. I think it's probably just um, I don't know, finding something that works for you in that moment, and not being so bogged down by your choice. Just find something that you think would work in that moment and stick to it, and don't change it for anything. And I think that will decrease the procrastination that you may be facing. That's just my advice, and I know kind of general, but I think that's what works for me. Number 6. Book dealers also talk about book hangovers when readers are so moved by a book that they find it difficult to move on to a new book. Have you ever felt this way? As I mentioned before, I do feel this way, but not because um, I'm hungover about the book or I'm sad that it's finished. It's more so that I'm probably just trying to digest all the information that I've read, and trying to close that chapter in my mind, and um, understand what themes and topics I've learned or have experienced in that book. And yeah, so I have felt that way, but it's not really to the point where um, I'm dreading on like moving on from the previous book, if that makes sense. Okay, number 7, tell us about a few books that almost always work for you, something that might have remained a favorite throughout your life despite any changing reading taste, something that always seemed to hit just the right spot when you need a lift, or perhaps some lifetime book hangover where the next text will always be at the back of your mind. So I watched Joshua Cable's video on this question as well, and I think similar to him, I don't think I've led such a long life as to experience this yet. But I envision myself having that nook in my mind, thinking about that specific text is probably Roald Dahl. I think Roald Dahl has been a very big part of my life. Not so much as in like how much time I spend on it, but rather the impact it has had on me growing up. So I think Roald Dahl will always be that one comfort author that will always hit, no matter how old I am. Reading James and the Giant Peach, or Matilda, or any book that he has. But I think Roald Dahl will be my pick for this question. And number 8 is tag people. I don't really tag people, but I welcome everybody to do this tag if you want. I'll post the questions into the description, and feel free to do it and tag me if you want. So yeah, that's it for my video today. I think I will be doing a few more videos in the coming month, because I'm much more free and I kind of miss making videos. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.